Today we're making love. What's that? We're making gloves. Oh. Today we're trying our hand at making some gloves. Sorry. Please stick around. Greetings, adventurers, and welcome to Skill Tree, where we learn how to do just about everything. So we've had glove making requested a bunch of times in various chats and now also in our Patreon. And since we try to do mostly whatever those folks want, we're going to give this a shot. I'm gonna confess though, this one intimidates the hell out of me. Before we get started on that one though, we actually have some exciting news. The Kickstarter for the Middle-earth Adventures event, the Brandywine Festival, is off and running. It is the first officially licensed LARP event of its kind, and it's happening here in the US. Anyways, we're gonna be there living our best hobbity life, and we'd love to see you there as well. Why don't you check out the link down below for more detail. All right, let's jump into it. Now, as I said, gloves have intimidated me for a while, but I think I've come up with a really good way to figure them out. And that's a thing I'm terming creative destruction, or educational destruction. I don't know, you guys can help me come up with something down in the doobly-doo. Basically, when I was a little clever, I used to take everything apart, bicycles, VCRs, and just try to put them back together as best as I could. And though I usually sucked at that last part, I learned so much by taking them apart. So we're gonna try that here today. We are going to take apart a glove to learn the construction of it, and then use what we learned there to make our own pattern and then our own glove. Now the glove I'm going to be using is this black little number here that I got from Amazon for a LARP event. I really like this one. It fits very well, but I lost its mate. I lost the other glove that goes along with it, so it was really cheap on Amazon anyways. I'll leave a link down below for it. But this leads us to kind of step one, is externally we can look at how the thing is put together. So for example, for you to be able to get your big meaty hands in there, the bottom of that cuff has this gusset here to make sure it can kind of open wide enough to accept your hand. The sides of the fingers also have gussets, which really makes the whole thing kind of form-fitting. If you look at something more like a work glove or whatever, it's usually just kind of stitched all the way around the fingers, so you have the front and the back and they're just kind of mushed together. By having these gussets, you're able to really make it form-fit and stay closer to the actual shape of your finger. Also gives you a lot more freedom of movement. And then we have the most complicated part of a glove, which is really where your thumb fits through. I think we're gonna learn the most by taking this portion of it apart. This looks to be made of 3 pieces, like a front piece, this little middle gusset area kind of in the crotch of your hand. That is a technical term. This is your crotch. And then a back of the thumb panel there as well. And then finally it has these little darts kind of across the back, which bring the whole thing in so it fits even more kind of formed to your hand. Cool, so now that we kind of understand how it fits together from the outside, let's flip it inside out and see how it's made on the inside here. And this was actually really interesting. So you can see on the back side of the hand here, the seam is actually lapped. That is the 2 pieces of fabric, like the gusset on the side and then the very kind of top of the glove. They pass each other, they lap over each other, and then a seam goes through both of them. Now I imagine this was done because you don't want the little ridges from a plain seam up against your knuckles here, because that's gonna really wear as you close and open your hand. So the flatter that seam is, the more comfortable that is gonna be. Whereas when you flip it around the other side, this is just kind of a plain seam, which is what happens when you take the good faces of fabric, you put them together, you sew along the seam line, and then you turn it inside out. Now I imagine the front of the hand was done this way for probably 2 reasons. One, because the front of the hand isn't gonna care as much about having stuff there, especially where it's positioned kind of on the sides like that. Mostly because you're using your meat hooks to do a lot of stuff and grab things. I doubt it's gonna bother that much. But also because when you're putting this thing together, you're not able to just sew through the whole thing, right? Because you're making a whole closed system. So I think that's the only way you could actually get to those seams in the first place. Now that flat lapped seam there also takes place on the palm, which makes sense because it would be really annoying to have something right there, while all the other seams are just that plain seam. Even the ones in between the fingers, which I imagine, again, is just for necessity, right? There's no other good way to sew that once it all comes together. But look at how, small that seam allowance is. That, I think, is gonna be the biggest challenge, is you can't have really large, pieces of extra fabric hanging out there because it'll get annoying. Okay, so now we have a basic understanding of how it went together and some kind of hypotheses of why it was put together that way. Now it's time to rip it to pieces. To do this, we're going to be using the aptly named seam ripper. Quick note with the seam ripper, I used to do this wrong all the time. I'd use the pointy side and kind of have that go in between the seams and rip. Problem is, it's very pointy and it would eventually always like stick into the fabric and rip it to pieces. Not ideal at all. Then I learned the correct way to do this. I actually use this little ball side here as the side that actually slides in between the seams. So as you push the ripper through, that ball makes it so nothing catches onto the fabric and it doesn't rip it to pieces. All you do is add a little tension to the seam to see those threads and then glide the seam ripper through. Though while doing that, I did still manage to kind of rip this piece apart here, which is another issue with these cheaper gloves, is they're not made out of like really thick, nice material. They're just kind of cheap, right? But if you do run into an issue like this, that's where the pointy end of the seam ripper comes in handy. You can just kind of slide under individual threads and then cut those one at a time. When I'm finished, I'm left with all of the dissected parts of this glove here. And you'll notice I made sure that I numbered all of them, especially the gussets between the fingers, because they all look fairly identical and I wouldn't want to lose track of where they go. Also, that little arrow is pointing towards the back of the fingers because directionality is important too. Now we can use these parts to really figure out exactly how to make a glove ourselves. Well, sure, you could use these parts just as patterns, right? Just kind of keep them off to the side. Whenever you need to make gloves, you can pattern them out using this thing. Totally good. But I want to learn how to do this ourselves. I want to learn how to just make a pattern bespoke to my hand. But we can use these parts as a cheat sheet to learn how that actually works. So, starting with the actual palm side of our hand. You can see with everything removed, once we slide it on, how it kind of slides around the thumb here, leaving space for the meat of your thumb to slide through, and also this kind of little extra piece here that goes into the crotch of your thumb. All right, I have the pieces here so we can talk about it. So with this on, we see like the reasoning for the shape of this. For example, right where this seam is right here, that's just the meatiest part of your hand. That's where that joint kind of moves. All this hole is for is to give you enough room to move, so that makes sense. Same with down here, the farthest part down, well, that's the very bottom, like where your hand connects to your wrist. On the other side, this goes up just high enough to kind of reach the very center of the pad below your index finger. Which again, once you kind of crunch your hand up, you can kind of see this triangle form right here. That's all the space that needs to move, and all that gap really is one big gusset to allow that movement. Which totally makes sense. I understand that. And then finally, this little extra piece here that goes up into the crotch of your thumb, well, that ends pretty much at the base of your thumb, which is allowing for this motion right here, right? And then the other half of that whole thumb equation just is that whole meaty space of your thumb needing to move. So to get those measurements, you can really just kind of crunch your hand up, and it's this. That is exactly the measurement you're looking for. Way more simple when you kind of understand why it's doing what it does. One last thing to keep in mind is the fact that it all has to be sewn together, so it's going to need a seam allowance, which means it's got to be a little bit bigger than your actual hand is. You can see here when I place it down on some paper and put my hand on it, it leaves about 1/4 of an inch around all sides and maybe about 1/2 of an inch at the very tips of the fingers there. Also, the gap at the bottom where you slide your hand in through, it can't be the circumference of your wrist because then you won't have enough room for your meaty knuckles to slide on through. So that is going to have to be roughly like what your knuckle width is, right? In order to be able to even get your hands in there. It's really cool to use these as some tools and then just my understanding of how it works to figure out how to do this. It's like a great workout for my brain, which is great because my brain needs the workout with all the extra work and traveling I've been doing lately. Speaking of which, and I feel like we're friends enough here to talk about it, another thing that needs work while I travel are my guts. Tell you what, living off of junk food in airport restaurants, not good for me. That's where we're lucky to have today's sponsor, Seed. Seed hooked us up with this DS-01 Daily Synbiotic, and I absolutely loved it. Actually, Maddie had talked about this first. She's been using it for a while, so I was really excited when they reached out to us. But yeah, DS-01 is like double the bang for your buck because it has a 24-strand probiotic and a plant-based prebiotic. It's gentle on the stomach and promotes like digestive health, heart health, skin health. And since it's specifically formulated to like make it through the crazy hellscape that is my stomach, I can actually trust that it's doing something. And since I am finding myself in like crowded airports and airplanes often, it's really nice to have something that like promotes a resilient immune system. Anyways, I take mine every morning just after the gym, and it's just part of that whole like wellness routine that I've built up for myself that honestly just makes me feel good. It also really helps that I don't have to refrigerate it. It's just great for traveling. Anyways, if you want to give this a try, just use the link in the description below and use my code SKILLTREE25 to get 25% off of Seed's DS01 Daily Symbiotic. Together we shall conquer our tummies and poop the poop of kings. Too much info? Too much info. Okay, so with all of that in mind, let's try to make our own pattern. I start Thanksgiving turkey style by just kind of tracing out my hand, but skipping over my thumb. Because, you know, the thumb's going to come out the front of the hand because of the way a hand is shaped. After tracing out my hand, I just kind of go around the whole thing, giving myself that 1/4 inch seam allowance everywhere I need it and the 1/2 inch on the fingertips. Now to get the opening for my thumb, I just kind of laid my hand in place and traced around where the meatiest part of my hand lies. And then sliding my pencil underneath there to kind of mark like right where the pad of that just underneath my index finger would be. That gives me this length, the very bottom of my thumb pad here and the very top of where that opening will be. Then I just kind of made a lazy arc to connect the two, trying to keep it roughly what I see in my hand when I do this thing. Not an exact science here, I'm trying some stuff out. Now when I look at this one, I see that like this highest opening at the top here and the next one over, they're kind of diagonal from each other. They're about an inch difference. So I just kind of mimic that thing coming up on the side and stopping there before connecting the two. That connection of the two is going to go away. That's just a guide for me so that I know kind of where to pull down from. Making a similar diagonal line about halfway in this space and then drawing in where it will kind of open up on the sides. Again, all of that is gleaned just by kind of looking at where things fall. That looks to be about right to me, so that's what I'm going with. Exactly the same thing for this thumb piece. I just kind of am laying it on me and seeing where everything is. As we established, it's just that kind of line where my hand folds. And that bird's mouth section right here, it falls right where my thumb kind of creases. So I just traced my thumb onto the paper and added that arc where I thought it would go before making my seam allowance around everything and then trying to put that bird mouth into place. It was at this point, though, that I realized that I'm really hard just kind of going on vibes with the way this thing works, and I should probably take at least some measurement. So I just measured from the base of my thumb to where that crease kind of happens there, and from the bottom of my thumb to that point of that index finger there. Then I just compared it to what I had and made little adjustments as needed. Though, especially with this part here that would be on the meaty part of my hand, I'm not too worried because these are actually going to just lap underneath this part. So it's not super crucial. It's perfect because you're never going to see it. I can just cut away any excess on the inside, which is great. That takes away some of the stress for how this works. After that, I just cut out those patterns. And though it's paper, it looks like it'll fit. Seems to be all right. I also noticed that the back of the thumb is almost exactly the same as the front of the thumb, just minus any of those little bird mouth features. So I just duplicated that and came straight down where it would normally branch off to go towards the index finger. All right, cool. The last parts we really need to figure out are the gussets in between the fingers. Now, if you look at the ones taken from the original glove, you're going to see that one side is longer than the other side is. That's because if you look at your hand, one side of your finger is actually longer than the other side. One goes all the way down to kind of in between your knuckles, where the other one stops right at the webbing between your fingers. So I take both of those measurements, one on the back and then one on the front, as well as the width at the widest part of my finger and at the thinnest part of my finger. Then I simply put those measurements on, starting with the longest side, then measuring off of that about a 1/2 inch higher to get the width of the widest part and the thinnest part put down before connecting them with a line. Then connecting them both with a lazy arch at the bottom for in between my fingers and a little arch at the top for the fingertips. Then finally traced in my seam allowance around the whole thing. And laying down the original, I was close, actually. It looks like mine are just a little bit longer, which kind of tracks because those gloves were just a little bit smaller on me. Not bad, they stretch, but like to me, that means I'm doing it right. I figured out how to make this accurately. I'm satisfied with that. I just cut out all of them that we needed. And at this point, we have everything we need. We can start making this thing, though I do want to test it out at least once before I start cutting into leather or whatever. So I just busted out some of this scrap fabric that I cut to size and then just pieced together with some double-sided tape just to see if everything fits. I didn't even put the gussets in. I really just wanted to see if the thumbs would fit and it felt like the front and back landed where they should land. And you know what? That's a thumb. That is a working, we can have a whole thumb war with that thumb. That moves in everything. It's all I needed to do. Though I did notice that the pad of the thumb cut, that front cut there, was longer than it needed to be. It kind of ran into my finger. So I just cut it away in my template so I'd know not to do that in the actual leather pieces. Now for my leather, I'm using this beautiful kit leather here, which is really great for gloves in the first place. It's super smooth on the outside and very like suede, nice on the inside. Oh, they're beautiful. Even better still though, they're cheap. I think each one of these rolls was like $9 and you can get maybe 4 gloves per roll. Really good, which is great because odds are I'm gonna screw this up somehow, and I don't want to do it on really expensive leather, though this is really nice leather. To cut it, I just laid it in place, traced it with an awl, and then cut it out with a sharp X-Acto blade, making sure I have all the bits and baubles accounted for and they are to spec. Though as a quick heads up, I figured like one side of my middle finger and the other side of my middle finger are going to be pretty much exactly the same, so I just duplicated that, flipping it over with the pattern. You don't have to, but it's what I did. Oh, super quick note on the leather though. Leather usually has one way that it's stretchy and one way that it's not. So you can see here, I try to stretch it this way, it doesn't move much, but it stretches quite a bit this way. You want to make sure the stretchy direction is the direction that you close your fist in, right? So like wrist to fingertips, that's the way you want it to stretch. I figure the first thing we would have to do, like order of operations wise, is put those gussets into place. But when I went to line them up with the back of the hand, I realized I made a mistake. As you can see, the very bottom of these gussets do not match up with the opening of my finger there. Like way off. And that's because I erroneously thought that the front of them and the back of them were exactly the same layout, just one has the thumb cut out and the other one doesn't. I was wrong because as we learned before, the back of our fingers are longer than the front of our fingers. I hadn't accounted for that. Luckily, the gussets do, so I just kind of used them as my measurement device, marked out how far down it would have to come, and then cut those longer. Then I lined those openings with some Tanner's Bond tape, flipping it over to cut out any of the excess so that I only had a little bit of that tape. Again, our seam allowances are gonna be really, really small here, so I don't want to have a lot of tape there. This just allows me though to stick them in place where they're gonna go before I sew them up. Now, because I dissected this one and I knew that those gussets on the side have to come together and meet in between your fingers to be sewn together, I know they have to meet at the bottom, right? One can't be super long while the other one is short. So when I ran across this issue between these two pieces of gusset, I knew I screwed something up. But lining my hand up where it would go, I realized that with the longer one, it would kind of bottom out before my fingers would reach all the way to the top where they're supposed to go. So that one was just too long. All I had to do was cut it to match what the other one was, and suddenly everything fit really nicely. I'm not really sure how I messed it up, probably because I shouldn't have mirrored that one. It's different on either side, so I don't know, maybe don't do that. Anywho, with all of those stuck in place where I want them to go, I figured it's good to move on to the thumb now. This one, again, had I not taken it apart in the first place, it would have been tricky for me to figure out how to put them together. Basically, this little part of the bird's mouth at the bottom of the thumb lines up with the corresponding edge that would actually fit like right up against the bottom of your thumb. So I just added some tape and carefully lined that up to stick it into place. Oh, before I forget, in case it wasn't obvious, everything I'm doing here is inside out. So with those gussets, I was doing it so that the outsides were facing in the same direction and I was sticking them together with the inside facing me. And the same here with the thumb. I've got the whole thing turned inside out and that's where I'm sticking everything together so that when I'm done, I could turn it right side out and most of those seams are gonna be hidden. Okay, so now that we have that piece of the thumb, the next bit is a little bit mind-bendy because we gotta think in 3 dimensions, right? So this bottom part of that bird's mouth needs to open all the way up and hug the other side of that little tab that fits into the crotch of your hand. With those things stuck together, the last thing we needed was to put that half circle part along its corresponding edge in the rest of the glove. You can see though that by doing this, you have something that's kind of trying to stick up, which is exactly what we want. We want it to stick up in that way because that's where your thumb is. Then I just taped on the back side of the thumb all along that open space there. And this is looking good. I was really, really excited about this. It fits like a glove, like it's perfect. I'm really excited about that. I can't express how cool that is for it to work. All right, with all these pieces stuck on, it's time to actually sew this whole thing up. I'm just hitting on the sewing machine with a really small, close stitch so that it's extra strong for me. I tried to give those fingers roughly like 1/8 of an inch of a seam, making the outside look nice and clean and having that nice overlap on the inside that'll be comfortable for the back of your fingers. I also sewed all the outside of the thumb together and realized after that was all done that I screwed up. That was an order of operations problem. What I should have done is sewn right here, right along the bottom of the thumb area first. Because now that it's closed up, there is no way to get to that without like hand sewing it or whatever. Stupid mistake. I tried my damnedest to afterwards. I sewed all around it, came as far up into that bird mouth as I can get, but I just couldn't get to that one area right there. I'm not gonna kill myself. This is like the first try. These are test gloves, but now we know, do that part first. In fact, I'd probably do this whole little peninsula here first, and then everything else. Live and learn. What are you gonna do? Okay, we're just about ready to put this together. I almost forgot to add the little gauntlet backings to it though. So I just cut those out really quick and then sewed them with a plain stitch by facing them together, sewing their edges, and then turning them back inside out. All right, now it's time to actually sew the two pieces of glove together. Again, turning them inside out so that the good sides are facing each other. I sewed the seam all along the outside of the glove, the non-thumb side here. Then I figured the next step would just be to kind of follow those lines all the way around, sewing the gusset to the front of the glove. Though this was wrong. I made a mistake doing this. You can't just kind of trace around the outside, as made evidenced by the two that I did here. The first one, the pinky one over here, is just, it's wonky. I tried doing that, just tracing around the outsides of it, and somehow it ended up like twisted. I don't understand how it did it, but just the geometry of the way the thing works, I have it pulling too much on one side. Whereas in the ring finger one, actually turned out really nice. It's really straight, got kind of that flat front with a nice rounded off back. It's exactly where I want it to be. The difference between the two is one of them I just kind of sewed continuously all the way around, whereas on the other one, the ring finger one, I sewed up each side of the gusset independently and then the tip afterwards. I'll show you in just a second, but I also learned while I was doing that getting to the in between the finger areas there to sew the bottoms of the gussets up, that's a nightmare in this process too. So I went ahead and did that first on all of the rest of the fingers so I wouldn't have to deal with that. All right, so let me show you on this next finger here. As you can see, I've already sewed up one side of the gusset and that finger. But it looks like it's super crooked, right? Like the finger is turned off to the side. There's a whole bunch of glove and gusset left on the other side. But again, with a glove, everything is in that three-dimensional space. We have to realize there needs to be enough room for a finger to go in there. So that's gonna take up all that extra space in the back. So after we've got that one side good to go, we next line up that finger with the edge of the gusset on the other side and sew that together. This leaves us with that flat front and that nice rounded out back. Finally, I just finished the whole thing off by closing up the fingertip. Doing this in these 3 steps just allows me to make sure everything is set up straight, and honestly, it worked. Like after putting all the rest of them together, the ones I did that way look so clean. So for me, this is the correct order of operations. If you've made gloves and you know better, just leave in the doobly-doo below, but like, this worked for me. And once the fingers are done, all we have to do is close up that last side there, turn it inside out, and holy crap, we have a glove. Guys, look at this. That is so cool. I didn't add the little gusset to keep this closed. I just didn't care enough. It's just like one more seam. But look at that. Now, it isn't perfect. I've learned a lot in the whole order of operations thing. Again, that little piece is open. I wasn't able to close that piece. Also, this cut right here, I think didn't go down far enough. It just feels a little tight right there. So this one I'll mark for my next one to go a little bit further down and just change my template accordingly. Same with the length of my index finger. It's just a little tighter than the other fingers, so I need to come up, I don't know, maybe 1/8 of an inch extra on that one. But come on, that is so cool. That is an awesome glove. And now we know how to make it. And because we understand why all the pieces work how they work, we can actually change them if we wanted to. So for example, I have this other little riding glove here, and I see the different ways this one was put together compared to the way this one was put together, and I know why. I could copy that if I wanted to. I can mix and match styles. I can do all of these things because I didn't just follow a pattern. I broke one apart, understood why it was made how it was made, and then remade it my own. God, I love that. That is so cool. I learned so much. I'd like to know what you all think. I know this is a little bit different, but I'm kind of into this creative destruction type of thing. Like maybe next time we get a really nicely made wooden cabinet, take that apart, learn how to do some tongue and groove joints or something, right? There's so many things we can learn by just looking at how people did it before us and really dissecting that and understanding it. I just think that's really cool, but again, let me know below. Also, if you liked what we did here today, don't forget to subscribe and give us some of that like it love. All right, well, now that I know how to do this, I'm gonna go make another pair of gloves. In the meantime, though, keep leveling up, you. You've made it to the end screen. YouTube loves it when you do that. It's a fantastic way to support this channel. Another fantastic way to support this channel is by joining these people's noble ranks. These are our Patreon members, and we can't do this without them. Special shout out to our newest high tier Patreon member, HM Callan, and of course our Grandmaster tier patrons, Just a Guy from the Southwest, Wild Fox 99, Froggy, Dragon Designs, and Eerie Satro. If you like what we do here and want to help support the cause, then consider joining our Patreon, link in the description below. Otherwise, you can watch one of these that YouTube thinks you'd like, and that helps out a lot too. This is the perfect I challenge you to a duel glove. If you haven't subscribed and you're not going to push the thing, then I challenge you. For real though, just click the buttons, they're free.